Buyouts limit risk for smaller studios, according to Phil Spencer. We're going to look at an interview he gave talking about risk mitigation. Sounds exciting, doesn't it? Stay with me. This comes from IGN Unlocked, where Phil Spencer said that studio acquisition are a good thing for the gaming industry. So I'm going to go through this and then we'll talk about it. He said, quote, "I know sometimes I see dialogue out in the industry about, well, are acquisitions a good thing or a bad thing? One thing I'll put out there is starting a new studio, starting any small business, frankly, is a very risky proposition. Starting a video game studio, even more so. And if a team actually takes the risk of starting a new company, starting a new studio, building that over years, building value in that, to say they shouldn't sell, I think, is just short-sighted." Spencer added that the value of growing a business to become something valuable couldn't be done without creative teams taking that risk in the first place, with acquisitions being a, quote, "natural and healthy part of the industry." It's such a risk-filled journey for them to get to the point to create real value. I'm always going to congratulate when teams get to the point where they realize that value through acquisition or just massive independent success. Many of those leaders will go off and start other things over time. It's kind of the natural turnover that happens with entrepreneurs and startup businesses. And for us, we're always out there looking at where we could continue to build our first-party capabilities and looking at teams that we think would be good fits for us. So Phil Spencer thinks acquisitions are inevitable and they're good and they help the industry, and of course he does. If anybody in a large corporation does, they want to acquire as much as they can because it helps them, it builds out their portfolio. Now, when you are a small studio, your goal, your dream is to create something that resonates with fans and gamers. And if it does and you're successful, you move from strength to strength and you become a successful studio. And once you create something of value, everybody starts to take notice, and acquisition talks become something that become more regular. So the problem with that is whenever you're acquired, and I don't care if Microsoft buys you or Sony buys you or Nintendo buys you, you give up a bit of creative freedom. You have to. You're now owned by a company. Their goals, their vision, whatever it is they believe that they want to see in their content, you better be clear. You're going to have to toe that line. So the idea of, hey, we just acquire this studio, but we're going to go hands off, let them do whatever they want, I promise you that's not true. Now, I'm not saying that Microsoft is going to force Bethesda to create something that they don't want to create, but you do give up a sense of independence. Now, that comes in a good way, of course, when you don't have to worry about money anymore. You don't have to worry about that risk that he's talking about. And those risks are much more riskier when you're independent, because if they miss, if those chances miss, you lose a whole lot of money. You don't have a lot of money to begin with because you're smaller or you're medium sized. So being acquired means you can take much more risk. Now, where I think he's coming from with this, and I don't want this to become a GamePass advertisement, but GamePass allows for risk aversion. So for instance, if you're a smaller studio or a medium-sized studio and then you're acquired by Microsoft, you created something of value, they took notice and they said, hey, we want what you make, and you agree to be purchased, you're now part of Microsoft first party. That risk, those chances can still be taken because you have a subscription service like GamePass. So the idea of, okay, now that we own you, everything has to be a hit, or these smaller ideas you had, well, we don't want them. Of course they want them because they have a surface. You look at something like Bleeding Edge. Obviously, I didn't like Bleeding Edge. Nobody did really like Bleeding Edge, and they were acquired, but they were still able to do what they wanted. And I think that's going to happen in the future with certain studios that Microsoft acquires. So the idea of acquisition is to take risk and mitigate it. The parent company now owns you. They pay for everything. You don't have to worry about anything. However, if Microsoft owns you and they have Game Pass, those smaller ideas can still exist. So for instance, you look at somebody like Insomniac. Insomniac's made really big AAA games, and they've been super successful every single time they've stepped up to bat. Sony acquired them. Sony doesn't want something small from Insomniac. So if Insomniac has an idea for a 2D game, I don't think Sony is going to be as, excited to approve that as they would something like a AAA game or DLC for a AAA game. That's where I'm trying to get. Game Pass allows for that acquisition and that risk to be mitigated, and I think that's where Phil Spencer was coming from with this. It was interesting. Let me know what you think in the comments section below. Think about liking and subscribing and sharing out on your favorite social media platform of choice, and I'll see you in the next video.